It is 2023. The football season is right up upon us. It is almost here, guys. We are 17 days away from TCU football kicking off against Colorado. That's right. Deion Sanders, his son Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter, those boys are going to be coming to TCU. Big noon kickoff is going to be there, and TCU is going to start their 2023 season at home against Colorado. National television. It's going to be must see. Obviously, there's going to be big eyes on the product. TCU, how are they going to look after the college football playoff championship game run? And then Colorado, how are they going to look? They have so many new players. 50 plus new players this upcoming season versus last year. There's going to be so much more to get into with that football, but this episode, we're not going to focus on the actual 2023 season. On this one, we're going to focus on realignment, and we're going to focus on TCU canceling as of today, August 15th? No, 16th, Wednesday, August 16th. The TCU, or not TCU, yes, TCU, sorry. They are canceling their rivalry with the SMU Mustangs. After 2025, which is the last game on their deal between each other, it's done. It's done. So we're going to talk about those two things today, and let's go ahead and kick it off, guys. First off, I just want to thank everybody who is coming back to the podcast, who is listening. I really appreciate you guys. I know we're starting out small right now, but man, we are going to be consistent. We're going to be here every week, and we are going to be pushing out that stuff for you TCU Horned Frog fans. So other than that, guys, let's go ahead and get into it. So obviously we saw with realignment, man, everything was ugly. It was crazy. There was he said, she said, all of that stuff going out. Obviously, the Pac-12 was trying to, loosen some, ruffle up some feathers. They were trying to, squeak out information here. Washington was squeaking out information there. Big 12 was squeaking out information there. It was all he said, she said until things got serious and finalized. Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah are now officially in the Big 12. All right. Colorado was the first team to make the move, and that was really the first domino, and all hell broke loose inside the Pac-12. Pac-12 went from 12 to 4. Obviously, you saw USC and UCLA leave to the Big 10. Now Washington, Oregon off to the Big 10. Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado to the Big 12. Now, what does that mean for the Big 12? That's great news. Obviously, great news. Big 12 is not going anywhere. They're here to stay. They have longevity. They're trying to secure their future. They already have their new TV deal done with, thanks to Brett Yormark. I believe it's up. They go back to market 2031. And that's even before, correct me if I'm wrong, that's before the ACC goes to market again, I believe in 2036. So that's a really good thing, especially if the Big 12 is able to build up its competitive natures, maybe establish some blue bloods there. TCU, Oklahoma State, maybe Utah. Utah's been doing something in the Pac-12. Even though the Utes may be looked at as a small school, they've been doing stuff in the Pac-12. They won the Pac-12 championship twice, beat Oregon, and they demolished USC. That was literally win and get in the college football playoff. They beat them, 47-26 in Las Vegas? Utah does that. I mean, I got mad love and respect for Kyle Whittingham. Utah is definitely a team that has the potential to be a big dog in the new Big 12. Now that Oklahoma and Texas, brand-wise, yes, they are the big dogs. Oklahoma has basically ran the Big 12. Texas really hasn't done anything in the Big 12, in the new Big 12 since 2012 when TCU and West Virginia came. Texas has done nothing, really, nothing of relevance. It's been Oklahoma that has really been winning the Big 12 year in and year out. Now those two are gone. Who is going to establish themselves now? Well, I mean, obviously the first one, in my opinion, the first one has to be TCU, right? It has to be. I mean, other people are going to talk about Kansas State, Utah, Texas Tech, and they're just going to ignore the team that had a completely new coach, took on a completely different roster, and went to the national championship. They're going to, forget about that. And I expect nothing less from national media. I expect nothing less. There is no talk about TCU, but there is talk about Texas. There's talk about Kansas State. There's talk about Texas Tech, but not a whiff of Baylor or not a whiff of TCU. I mean, TCU was just came out as number 17 in the AP poll this past Monday. Number 17, somehow Texas is 11. Somehow Iowa is 25. How is Iowa 25? I don't even know, man. I really don't. But with the new Big 12, you see that there's now potential for people to, establish themselves. Like I mentioned, TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Utah, and one I didn't mention was UCF. UCF, that is a breeding ground of top talent. Top talent. You can't argue it. You can't even deny it. They are in the bed of Florida. Now they're a Power 5 school. Technically a Power 3. They're in the third best conference. Good alumni base. Now that you're a Power 5 team, you got donors that are going to want to donate more now. So they have the potential to become a top dog. Yes, there's stadium right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if in 3 years they undergo a stadium renovation. But now the Big 12, you see in the Big 12 that what we were feeling 2 years ago, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the Big 12? What's going to happen to TCU? Do we need to go beg the Pac-12 to take us? Do we need to try and bust the door down in the Big 10 and try and beg them to take us? Now those Pac-12 teams were that way. When USC and UCLA left, the four corner schools, Oregon and Washington and everybody else were in that discussion. They were now feeling the way we felt. And when everything just broke down to the Pac-12, everybody wants to talk about, oh, this is bad for college football. Oh, my gosh, they don't deserve it. Where was all that when Oklahoma and Texas left the Big 12? Everybody kept saying TCU is going to go back to being small TCU. Oh, Baylor's going to go back to being small Baylor. Texas Tech, Oklahoma. I mean, where was the sympathy for everybody in the Big 12? Now you want to have sympathy for the Pac-12. No, this was a dog-eat-dog world. And Brett Yormark got on top of it, and he saved his conference from basically dissolving in 2025. Now, again, will it dissolve in 2035 and 2040? Because maybe we go to 2 mega conferences. Who knows? But at least for the next 10 to 15 years, or guaranteed 6 years, because that's the new media deal, that's how long he has saved it. And now you're adding programs like Arizona, who is great and hot in basketball. That's a blue blood program. You're adding Colorado, who just added Dion. Now, many may say Colorado didn't win anything, and those are facts. Those are facts. They did go 1-11 last year. They haven't done anything. They haven't played in a Pac-12 championship. That is true. But now they have Deion Sanders there. They have the eyes of the nation on them now. They're going to have the exposure, media-wise, television-wise. They're going to have all that going for them now, which, again, starts to increase ratings, which when ESPN looks at that, when Fox looks at that, when maybe Apple TV looks at that, come 2031, they're going to say, wow, there is new value here in the Big 12. We have to extend it. Colorado has come up. Their ratings are great. TCU has, been in the Big 12 championship for 5 years straight or whatever, and they're now a big-time program. Like, yes, let's renew. That's the good thing about this for the Big 12 and mainly TCU. Now, will we eventually get to those 2 mega conferences, and will the Big 12 dissolve at some point? Possibly. That is still a possibility. That's still a possibility. Nothing is here for the long term right now. You're just trying to find your place. If you're TCU, maybe best bet is to continue to win, play in the Big 12 championship, win the Big 12 championship, get to those playoffs, especially when it goes to 12 teams next year in 2024. Get those college football playoff appearances, rack them up, get those wins in there, advance, and maybe you get that invitation to the Big 10, because the SEC, I just don't see how Texas A&M and Texas are going to, vote for TCU to be in. Texas A&M is too scared to schedule TCU for a home and home, especially now. Texas has been getting their ass whooped against TCU. Why would Chris Del Conte and the presidents sign off on that? Why would they want TCU in the SEC? Why? Again, maybe your best bet is to go to the Big 10 and say, hey, you have no ground here in Texas. Let us be your ground in Texas. Let it be another recruiting bed for you guys to access, right? Instead of just having to go all the way across. Maybe you can do your recruiting there in DFW. Possibly. I mean, if you're TCU and you're thinking about the long run, that might be, because again, we got to see how all this plays out. But this is good news for TCU right now. This is great news for the Big 12. And adding those 4 schools is big time. And it saves you, really. It saves you because, again, if you were a fan of any team in the Big 12 except Oklahoma and Texas, remember how you felt. We were hearing Kansas and Iowa State potentially going to the Big 10. Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Baylor, and TCU going to the Pac-12. You know, we heard all about that. And now the Pac-12 is basically about to dissolve. California, Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State are the ones remaining. It's the Pac-4 now. And Stanford doesn't, I mean, the Big 12 wanted Stanford in California, but Stanford doesn't want to come here because BYU is here. For whatever reason, they have a problem with BYU and they don't want to save themselves. They don't want to come to a stable conference where you're going to be making 31, possibly more. Right now, it's 31.7 per school. Apparently, there's going to be something going on with Brett Yormark in a meeting that can potentially raise the payout per school in the deal. So that's already like, why would you not want to do that if you're Stanford? But because they have a problem with how BYU goes about things, they don't want to do it. So, hey, don't beg them. You already got 4 corner schools. Wait it out. See what the ACC is going to do. Clemson, Florida State, maybe they're trying to get into the SEC. Will Florida want Florida State in the SEC? We'll see. Clemson, they're a big dog. They can get in the SEC. What about North Carolina, Virginia, NC State, Louisville, those teams, Miami, in best case scenario, I would love if Clemson and Miami and those boys, they came to the Big 12. I would love that. But odds are it's probably very low, right? It's probably very low. But other than that, guys, it's been a wild year in recruiting or in realignment, especially the last month, or maybe really the last 3 weeks. The last 3 weeks has been insane. So it's been crazy. And especially with what was going on with Washington and Oregon. I mean, they were wanting more money for travel expenses, and then they were going to go back to the Pac-12. They basically, the Big Ten folded, really. They didn't want to go higher than, what was it, 35 million, I want to say. They didn't want to go higher than that for Washington and Oregon. Washington said, hey, we need 10 million more or we're going back to the Pac-12. So I guess Washington leaked something. They were going to go back to the Pac-12. The Big Ten folded, had another meeting and said, okay, we'll submit to your demands. So really, Washington bent Big Ten over and got their way. How? Why? Hey, kudos to them. You secured your future in possibly the second best conference. So other than that, let's go ahead and move forward. Now, as of today, Stephen Johnson of the I want to make sure I get this right, actually, because I know Brett McMurphy tweeted something out, but he was not the guy that actually broke it first. Yes, Stephen Johnson, writer for the 4-Star Telegram, he reported today. Let me pull it up here. All right, he tweeted today in talking, well, and I quote, in talking with TCU AD Jeremiah Donati, the reason for pausing the battle for the Iron Skillet with SMU is to add more home games. TCU will have 8 home games in 2026. Door is still open for a home game in the future with SMU. So basically, you see this right now. Maybe there's a thinking that maybe the Big 12 is going to go to 10 conference games, 2 non-con, and then 10 conference games. Does it work out really that way? Maybe, maybe not. I think the best decision is to stick with your 3 non-conference games. You have your G5 in there. Me personally, I don't care for the FCS. Yes, they're supposed to look good on paper, beat a team 70-7. Like, yes, those probably look good. But when you get into this new era of the college football playoff, you have to have a strong resume, especially if you're not your conference's champion. If you're the number 2 team in there, you have to have not only the wins, but you also have to have the resume. And that includes losses. Was it a quality loss? If you were to schedule a home and home with Penn State, and you lost, that would look so much better than losing to SMU. So, me personally, I'm a fan of this. I have been wanting TCU to put this to a stop because the last game is going to be in 2025 at TCU. We're going to be at TCU in 2023. We're going to go back to SMU one final time in 2024. Then in 2025, it's going to end in the Carter. And then after that, I mean, if you just go through our non-conference games, really, if we go back to, this year, our non-conference games are Colorado, Nicholls, and SMU. Colorado, how good are they going to be? Nicholls is your FCS team, and then SMU. Like, what is that non-conference schedule? Honestly, like just on paper, can Colorado go on and win 10 games? Like, I think it's highly unlikely because of the big of a turnaround they've had. But is it likely? Can it happen? Possibly. SMU. What do they do for you? If you're TCU, what do you have to gain from this game anymore? What is there to gain? You already beat them in 2005. You already made it to the Big 12. You've already become a top dog in the Big 12. You've gone to 2 Big 12 championship games. You've won a Big 12 championship in 2014. You've gone to the college football playoff. You've beat Michigan. You're the only Big 12 team, including Oklahoma and Texas, to win a college football playoff game. And you went to the national championship. Like, yes, did they get absolutely humiliated 65-7? Yes, but everybody in the country was at home watching TCU. They were at home. So if we go back to 2024 and look at our non-conference schedule, right now we have Stanford. We're at Stanford next year, and SMU. We're on the road in our non-conference games twice. Non-conference games we're going to be on the road. At Stanford and at SMU. Now you go to 2025. Our 2025 schedule consists of at North Carolina. Now, is North Carolina going to be an SEC or Big Ten team by then? Who knows? Could they still be an ACC team? Who knows? But North Carolina, I think that's a solid game to have on your non-con schedule. That's a solid game to have. And then you're at North Carolina. Then you're at home against Abilene Christian. Okay, so you still got your FCS game in there. And then SMU. So again, I just don't get the reason to have them on the schedule anymore. Like, I understand where realignment is taking college football. Like, there are some good rivalries that have been rivalries. You know, the Apple Cup, you've had Bedlam and all that stuff. Like, yeah, like there's some things that are being ruined by NIL, by TV networks driving everything with their money. I agree. But this isn't that. TCU has dominated this thing. And especially since they've become a Power 5 team, they have dominated that series. And I just don't see what you have to gain. I understood it back in 2005, although I was probably like 7 years old, but understanding it at the time, okay, I understand why you're going to continue to play that game. But now, TCU, like, I hate to say it because I always want to be that humble fan base of a humble program and university. TCU is just above SMU. They're above playing them. They're above this rivalry. They're above the iron skillet. Like, they are. And that's just facts. That's not hyperbole. That's not just me pulling something out of my behind. That's facts. That's just the way it is. So, hey, man, I'm happy. I'm happy this is ending because your next couple years of non-conference schedules, I mean, it's kind of weak. Stanford, what are they going to be? David Shaw's not there anymore. This isn't the Andrew Luck days and, even the Hogan days with Bryce Love and them, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and all those guys. This isn't that time. It's not that year. It's not that time. Who is Stanford going to be? North Carolina, definitely. North Carolina, I think that's a good home and home series. But now you're going to have to start, if you want to be that team, if you want to take the next step, you have to get some games in there that's going to drive ratings. I'm sorry, man, but TCU and SMU is just not going to do that. Now, if you look at the other teams, remember, Oklahoma has been scheduling freaking Ohio State. Okay, they remember that home and home they had with Ohio State, and you look at Texas, they got Alabama. They have Alabama again this year. They're going to have Michigan. Okay, they're going to have Michigan. They're going to have LSU. You look at other teams in, Texas Tech and Oregon. I'm gonna be watching that game. You got to get these games on your schedule because it's more exposure for your university, for your program, for your home stadium. Because if you do home and home, obviously that's going to be big time. And if it's going to be a night game, that's even better. That's even better. Go back to when TCU had a home and home with Ohio State. And then for some reason, it got scratched and it just became a one-time game at Jerry World. TCU could have benefited from having that home and home with Ohio State. But now you are now the top dog in the Big 12. You have elevated yourself. You have elevated your name, your prestige, your program. You got to start making moves like you're a big dog, which means if that means you have to say goodbye to little OSMU, then so be it. That's what big dogs do. And if you're the A side of the negotiations, you get to make that decision. And that's just what TCU is now. That's just what TCU is now. I mean, their whole program, football, basketball, baseball, men's tennis, women's rifle. I mean, you go on and on and on. And even men's golf won the national championship. Their athletics program is getting up there. This was a record year in admissions for the university. And if you keep on doing that, your stadium is going to be sold out. And of course, you want to get more exposure for the team and the fans. So again, why is Jeremiah Donati doing this? He wants to have more home games. He wants to have more home games. And in 2026, TCU is going to have 8 home games out of 12 games, out of 12 regular season games. 8 of those are going to be at home. And even if you go back to last year with Michigan, if you were doing your preview and your homework on Michigan, you would have noticed they rarely played on the road. They were never uncomfortable. They were never uncomfortable. They were at home all the time. So, but you know what? They had that exposure. They were able to have those recruits come back in front of this raucous crowd. That's what TCU wants. I think that's what TCU wants. Does Jeremiah Donati want that? Minimum, he wants 7 games a year at home. Now, if you want to go to SMU, hey, we can continue playing this game, but it's going to be at our house. It's going to be in Fort Worth. It's not going to be in Dallas. I love that. I love that. Jeremiah Donati is not at the little kids table anymore. This isn't the little kids table anymore. You're now with the big dogs. So now you have to call shots like a big dog. Me personally, I want to see some home and home games, maybe some games at Jerry World or games in Las Vegas or LA. Get some of those games in. Maybe call up. I highly doubt they'll ever answer the phone. Call up Texas A&M. Continue that in-state battle. Call up LSU. We want to see you again. Call up Penn State. Call up Minnesota again. Call up Michigan. We just beat you in the playoffs. So let's go ahead and get a little bit of a rivalry going here. Let's get a home and home in. Ohio State. Maybe Iowa. Maybe Michigan State. Maybe go to the SEC. Maybe go to Kentucky. Do you want to call Georgia? I don't know. Maybe you need a little bit more time before you see them again. Call Tennessee. Just call somebody. Go for those big time matchups. Go for them. More exposure. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You don't want to be known as that person. So I like it. I like the fact that they ended it. They're putting it on hold. That's a boss move, honestly, if you ask me. I love it. I love what Brett Yormark has done. I love what Jeremiah Donati has done. And apparently he turned down a job at USC. Now, is this guy getting a lot of consideration for 80 jobs around the country? Well, hey, this isn't, little old TCU anymore. TCU's become a really good job now with really good coaches, a really good program, really good athletics. This would be a great job for somebody to come in, and it's a great job for Jeremiah Donati, and I hope he is here for the next 20 years. I hope he is here to navigate TCU through this new Big 12 and possibly what's to come in 20 years, maybe fewer. So, guys, this has been an episode of the Purple Rain podcast, guys. I am Michael Pevia. As always, we will be back with you next week to talk more about some football, about the team, about the Big 12 in general, because we got to get into Houston, UCF, BYU, and Cincinnati coming through. You're not going to see UCF or Cincinnati this year, but they are going to see Houston. What is it? Their week 3 game. So they're going to start Big 12 conference play early in week 3 before they go back to non-conference against SMU. We got them. We're going to be in Houston this year, and then we're going to play BYU. So that's going to be an interesting game again as well. So other than that, guys, we will see you back next week. Thank you for following along. And if you like this podcast, guys, if you want to continue coming back here and let's talk football, let's talk about the TCU Horned Frogs, man, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube, and make sure you're following us on Twitter. Well, maybe it's X now. We're still there. Thank you again, guys. We appreciate you. We love you. I love you. I appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week.